Welcome to Extraordinary Women on thatchannel.com. I'm your host, Shannon Skinner. Today, you are going to meet author Susan Armstrong, who's written a book called An Invisible Prison. And later in the segment, before we take a break, I'll have my regular Good to Know Minute when I ask my guests for their top tip on creating a successful life. You're going to hear Susan. Susan, hello.
Hi, thanks for having me.
And thanks for being here today
No
on
problem.
a very, very snowy, cold morning in Toronto.
Oh, the cold, I can't take it.
I fought the elements getting here. I don't know about you.
God. Oh, up the hill, no shoes. Oh, yeah, no. It's cold.
Now, you are an author, a speaker, a trainer, and a radio show host. You're a very successful businesswoman.
Yes.
But your life story is quite interesting because it hasn't always been this way.
It has not always been that way, no. As a matter of fact, it's only been that way for the last 20 years. The 20 years prior to that was much different.
That's right. You spent about 20 years homeless, in a gang. You've been stabbed. You've been shot. You've been addicted to drugs and alcohol. And now you're a successful businesswoman.
Yep.
This is not your everyday regular story.
No, it's not. I always describe it that if it's happened, it's like if it's possible to happen, it's likely happened to me. You know, the only thing that has never happened to me is I've never been sexually abused by a family member. But other than that, it's up for grabs. So yeah, I've been shot, stabbed, beaten to within an inch of my life, left on the side of the road for dead. I was a gang member for many years, street gang member, graduated to motorcycle gang member. I'm not sure if that's, a good graduation. I'm not sure which way that is, up or down, but graduated to property of a motorcycle gang and spent many years as property of a motorcycle gang, which is pretty much a cult. It's living in a cult. So it's been an interesting journey.
Of course, now this is the subject of your book, An Invisible Prison.
Yes.
What sparked you to write
well,
the story?
The title, I think, An Invisible Prison kind of says it all. It's the invisible prison that I created for myself, that I actually lived in for more than 20 years. But, I was 11 years old when I hit the street, result of drugs and alcohol. The alcohol, when I first drank alcohol, it took away all of the feelings that I had. I describe it as for the first 11 years of my life, it was like living on eggshells. So it was always, that feeling where you're afraid to step the wrong way, or it was like living, just walking through life on eggshells. And when I drank alcohol that first time, it took away that feeling where I actually didn't care if I was perfect, if people like me, if anything. I always describe it that I was raised with two really important rules in my house. They were the cardinal rules. And that was, number one, that you always have to be perfect, that if you're not perfect, that other people won't like you. And second, that you never, ever, 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 for any reason ever, should hurt anyone's feelings, ever. So when I was a kid, I was trying to be perfect, trying to be all things to all people, trying to make everybody happy, trying to please everyone, never saying no. I mean, it was classic. People pleasing, perfectionism, control, all of that before I was 10. So when I was 11 and I tasted alcohol, I drank that first bit of alcohol and all of those feelings went away. All of a sudden, I didn't care anymore if I was perfect. I didn't care if people were angry at me. I didn't care if, people liked me or not. I didn't care. And I spent the next 20 years chasing more of that feeling and whatever I could do to get it. When you're 11 years old and you want alcohol, there's only one place to get it, and that's on the street. And so that's how it started. I wrote the book a few years ago now. It took me about 5 years to actually write the book. It took a bit of time as well for me to get the courage up to actually publish it. I wrote it not necessarily because I wanted to, but the whole story of how I got where I am now from what you've described is nothing more than a miracle or divine intervention, whatever you want to call it. And there was a voice that just would not let go, that just said, you need to write a book, you need to write a book, you need to write a book. And finally I said, okay, fine, I'll write a book. And I wrote the book, but it wasn't because I wanted to. It was because I needed to quiet the voice in my head that said, write a book, write a book, write a book. And that's what I did. And then, deciding to publish it was a whole different journey again.
Well, we really expose ourselves. Our vulnerability becomes, we're showing it on our sleeves and everywhere else.
Absolutely.
We write our own stories.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I had cultivated a very nice, successful life for myself, as you said, corporate trainer. I had all these fabulous clients, and I had to go to them and say, the me you think you know, not so much. Here's this book. And it was really scary because, as you say, it's not an expose. I certainly could have made it that. It's not. I wrote it from an emotion standpoint. I mean, I came from a normal family. My parents were wonderful. They taught me the meaning of unconditional love because they never abandoned me. I abandoned them. I left my life. I checked out of the human race. It was not anything they had done to me. And so for me to come from, because normally when you hear a story like mine, you think broken home, you think severe abuse, you think many things. You don't think, 2 children, loving parents who are still married, white picket fence, that kind of thing. It's not the image you get in your head when you hear a story like mine. So I wrote the book not as an expose, but more from an emotional standpoint, so that either anybody trapped in that world of addiction or any loved ones of people trapped in addiction, parents, siblings, friends, family members, could actually read what was going on in my mind, about what drove me to do the things that I did, so they could understand, the emotion, the feelings that were driving it. Because I think if you can get down to that level, you can start to help. But if you look at the behavior itself, you don't know what to do, because the addicted person themselves will lie because they don't know why they're doing what they're doing. And that was the reason I wrote the book, was to help people understand the emotions behind what drove me more than the action.
Now, you're based in Toronto. Where did you actually grow up?
I am from England, so I grew up here in Canada. I also did what in recovery circles is known as a geographical cure. I did several of those, where I felt for a long time I blamed my parents. I thought, if I could just leave them, that everything would be fine and lovely and rosy. And so I left many times, and moved back to England at one point, and moved to all over the place just trying to get away. What I didn't realize is that I took me with me, and so whatever problems I thought I was leaving behind, I was actually bringing with me, because they were my problems, not created by anybody else's. They were created by me. So
Wherever you go.
wherever you go, there you are.
Now, in reading your book, there was a little description of your eye-opening moment to the world of motorcycle gangs, when you were in the car with your father.
Oh gosh, yeah.
And a motorcycle pulls up, and a couple, and there's that moment. Was that did that change your life?
The moment that you're referring to was in the book I talk about, and I don't remember how old I was. I think I was maybe 9 or 10. And we were driving down the street, and I saw a motorcycle ride by with a gang member on it and a girl on the back, and I thought, one day I'm going to do that, because it just looked so free, and it looked so cool, and it looked like, they didn't have a care in the world. And I think there's a number of different lessons in there. First of all, that we can be very powerful manifestors. Our minds are very powerful, and we have to be careful what we focus on, because actually it will come true in one form or another. And mine certainly did, because that's exactly what ended up happening to me. So there's a number of different lessons in there for me, and one is the power of our minds, and how powerful we can be in terms of manifesting what we place our focus on. And the second one is, be careful what you wish for. You might get it. I got it. It wasn't at all what I thought. And you know what? As that just came out of my mouth, it kind of is. I won't lie and say that when I started to recover, so after I had escaped, when I was in recovery, in the early years, in the first 5 years, there were many a time where I thought that it would be easier to be in that life and be beaten and, be totally controlled and all of that. There was, I don't even know how to explain this. It's the reason that women stay in abusive relationships, because of course I was in one. He tried to kill me on many occasions. and it's the reason women stay in abusive relationships. There's a certain safety in it, and I know it sounds odd, it sounds backwards, like it's upside down, but low stress, to feel safe. Predictability is safety. So when you can predict what's going to happen, it's very safe. And so when I recovered, everything was new, because don't forget, I was 11 when I hit the street. So basically, when I sobered up, everything was new. I had never driven a car sober. I'd never had a relationship sober. I'd never done anything pretty much sober. Everything I did was a first. And there were many times where I thought, you know, it was hard to choose what to wear that day, or what was appropriate to wear, or what should I say, or what did I talk about. It was so much easier being told what to do. There was a certain safety in it, and there was a certain freedom in that, because nothing was my fault when it was being dictated by everybody else. And how confusing and screwed up is that, right? But that's why we stay in abusive relationships. It's safe.
And you know, you've been stabbed and shot.
Yeah.
These things must really impact you, I would imagine, deeply.
The story, the life, the 20 years is symptomatic of something deeper. Right? They were symptoms. That was my outward looking for something to fill the void, to fill the pain. The underlying problem was that I had no coping skills, and I had no self-esteem. Basically, I hated myself. I didn't know who I was. I didn't like myself. I thought there was something fundamentally wrong with me, and I did not deserve to walk on this planet. And so everything that happened from the time I was 11 on, I'm not sure if being shot or stabbed had a more profound impact than realizing that I was worthless and that I didn't deserve to be here. That, to me, was the biggest impact, and that happened way before any of the stuff in the book. That happened way before I was 11. I mean, I remember being 10 years old and saying, I'm done. I'm done. I'm not going to try anymore, because it doesn't matter what I do. It's never right. You know, it's never good enough. It's never perfect enough. There's something wrong with me. I don't deserve to be here, and I'm done. And I remember being 10 years old and laying in my bed and having those thoughts and making that decision. That, to me, was more of an impact. Everything that came after that, the gangs, the alcohol, the drugs, was a symptom of me trying to fill that void, that hole of not feeling worthless, or not feeling worth anything, of feeling worthless, of not feeling like I belonged anywhere.
Now, and you describe you were the property of a gang.
Yeah. It's street gang I was a member of. Motorcycle gang, the patch on my back actually said property of, and then the name underneath it. So in the hierarchy, I was kind of lower than the dogs. The women were lower than the dogs. We were just property to be traded or told what to do. We were a commodity.
Now, what was the turning point when you decided that you needed to change your life?
There were a couple of things that happened. Like I said, it was a lot of divine intervention. Honestly, it's the only way I can describe it. There was one point I had been beaten. I always describe it as beaten to within an inch of my life, and that's because they left me on the side of the road in a van. They thought I was dead, and they left me on the side of the road. And I remember very vaguely a couple of days later, I don't know how long it was, they told me a couple of days, I remember somebody being there, and all I remember is this voice saying, "Oh, you're still alive." And it was one of the gang members saying, "Oh, you're still alive." And they took me back to where we lived and sent me back to work. And I remember going into the bar, and they wouldn't let me out on the floor. That they put me in the office, and they said, you can't be out in public looking like this, because there wasn't an inch on me that wasn't cut or bruised or, had been bleeding or stitched up with a bottle of Jack Daniels and a fishing line and a needle. And so I was sitting in the office, and one of the girls came back, and I remember clearly she came back, and she gave me a drink and gave me some money and slid it across the table, and she just looked at me and she said, if you don't care enough about yourself to look after you, we're done looking after you as well. This is the last time. And that stuck with me. That really stuck with me. And there was something about that made me kind of say, if I keep doing this, I'm gonna die, and I need to do something. And so that was the first one. That was the first turning point. That's when I escaped from the gang. And I escaped my father very kindly took me in, and I'll never forget coming home to my parents, and I thought that there was going to be just flowers and they were going to be so happy to see me and everything was going to be rosy, you know, and life was just going to be perfect because I had escaped. And again, I brought me with me, and I left the gang and life got worse.
And we're going to talk a bit more about that. We have to take a break, but before we do, I've got my good to know minute.
Yes.
Susan, I know you've got a great tip for the viewers.
I do. Cultivate and practice self-awareness, and it is not easy by any means. It's really hard. It takes a lot of courage, but it is the best thing you will do for yourself, for your family, for your friends, for everyone around you.
Thank you. We're going to take a break, and we'll be back with Susan Armstrong. Welcome back to Extraordinary Women on thatchannel.com. I'm Shannon Skinner, and I'm here speaking with Susan Armstrong. Now, just before the break, we were talking about how you had changed, or what sparked you to change your life.
My first turning point.
Your first turning point, that's right.
Yeah, there were many.
You had a second turning point.
Yeah, it was a tough case, I think. Yeah, I had more than two. But, you know, the first one caused me to escape the life, so to speak, the life in the gang. When I came back and my parents were divorced by then, my father very kindly let me live with him. Life actually got worse, and I spent 2 years. I mean, I'd been trying to kill myself for 18 years through indirect means, but I spent 2 years trying to consciously, actively commit suicide and couldn't do it. Not for lack of trying. I mean, I tried. I just kept waking up. You know, I kept waking up, and at one point I thought, you know, I remembered that I was at a point where I couldn't even work anymore. It was so bad. I was so bad. And I remember thinking, you know, I used to be able to work, and I figured that if I could do it at some point in the past, I should be able to do it now, because I didn't understand. I couldn't make the connection. I literally could not make the connection between the alcohol and drugs and the fact that I was so bad off. And so I got a job, and I got a part-time job. I thought I'll start slow. And anyway, it's a long story, but I ended up meeting a guy, and, you know, we ended up moving in together, and I figured that I might have a problem with alcohol. Oh, you think? And so one day I woke up. I got a job out of the bars. I got a job in a ladies' clothing store, and I did really well for a year. I used to say I quit drinking because I had 4 hangovers in 1 year. So for me, that was quit drinking. I didn't quit, but, you know, in my mind, I did. And one day I woke up, and I had to go to work at 12 o'clock, and it was 10 o'clock, and it was May, and it was sunny, and it was lovely, and I thought, oh, I think I'll have a drink. And the last thing I remember that day was accepting a case of beer from the cab driver at 4 o'clock in the afternoon in my bathrobe. I called and quit my job. I told them that they deserved a better employee than me. I was a lousy human being, that I didn't deserve to be, you know, walk the face of the earth, let alone be an employee for them, that they were so nice. And that's the last thing I remember. The next morning I woke up, I opened up a beer, I took 2 sips of it, I looked at the bottle, and I remember thinking to myself, if I continue to do this, I'm going to die. But if I stop doing this, I'm going to die. And that's when I realized that I had real problems and that I needed help. And I knew that no doctor would touch me unless I dealt with the drinking first. And so that actually was when I actively started to look for help for my addictions. So that was a huge turning point for me. Huge turning point.
Now, today, you've got a successful business, and, you know, one of my very favorite topics to talk about is the meaning of success, because I do believe that each of us has a different definition, or one that's unique for ourselves.
Yeah.
Now, when you were a gang member,
yeah,
success, at some point you felt successful within the gang. What did that mean to you?
Well, you know, I never did. I never felt like I fit in anywhere. You know, I never felt like I fit in my own skin, let alone anywhere else. Success for me when I was in the gang was, could I make it through a day without getting beat up? You know, that was pretty good if I could. And most days I couldn't, but I'm a little rebellious, just a touch. And I couldn't make it through. But a bigger definition for success back then was, I remember, you know, those years. And to me at the time, success meant, and all I ever wanted was to be a real person. And that was success to me. And being a real person meant, being a real person meant that you had a house that had closets and a doorbell. and had a refrigerator that had stuff in the door of the refrigerator, like mustard and ketchup and relish, and not cans of Budweiser. And that was success. Yeah, it's a little different today.
And so how would you define success in your life then today?
Well, I have stuff in the door of my refrigerator, and it's not even close to cans of Budweiser. Today, success for me is actually really simple, and I think at the same time complex. That I realized that you don't get given a life like mine for nothing. I realized when I was in recovery that there are many times I should have died. Like I said, should have died just because of my life. How many times I've been shot and stabbed and beaten. But the times I should have died where I was actually actively trying to kill myself, taking pills and drinking. And I would wake up in the morning and I realized that you don't get given that without a purpose for it. And I had no explanation. I still have no logical explanation for why I was still around, why I could put two sentences together, why there wasn't more damage to me than what was done. And success for me for 20 years now has simply meant that for me to be successful, I need to live up to my full potential. I need to do what I was put on this earth to do. And that's what I do. And my question to myself every single day is, did I help someone today? And if the answer is yes, then I'm successful today. The money, everything else has nothing to do with it. Am I living up? I got a second chance. They kept me alive. And by they, I mean the divine intervention, the unnamed, unseen forces that kept me alive for so long. They kept me around for a reason, and I vowed that I would pay them back for the second chance that I have. And that's all I ever want to do every day. So that's my question every single day. And if I'm doing that, and I believe I am every day, and that's why I'm doing this show, it's why I wrote the book, it's why I have the radio show, it's why I have the website, it's why I go out and do corporate training, it's why I do every single thing that I do. It's why I stopped and donated to the charity across the street on my way over here today. Was I need to be able to give back and pay back the second chance that I have. And for me, that means living up to my full potential. It means using my story for good, not as an excuse to hide behind. And it means sharing it as much and as often as possible in the hopes that other people who suffer like I did will find some sort of inspiration, some sort of help, some sort of wisdom in how I've lived my life and how I've turned it around.
So you are the message.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you want the
Your
message.
life is the message.
I'm the message. We were joking earlier. I said, no, I used to live behind a dumpster out back of a laundromat. Today I have 2 homes, but that's really not the point. The point is that I have 2 homes simply because it allows me to reach more people and do more good than just having 1 home would do. It's not about the money. It never has been. It's about reaching as many people as possible, touching as many lives as possible in a positive way.
Now, one of the things that you do, or your topics that interests you, is what are the warning signals that change is necessary? I mean, what should people be looking for?
We're amazing as human beings. Our minds are amazing, and they govern our bodies. I watch people, and when I started doing this for a living, I didn't start out to do this. I didn't even know that professional speaker was a thing, let alone that you could make a living at it, that I could support myself doing it. I didn't even know that. All I knew is that I was sobering up and I was watching. I had to start from the beginning and learn how to communicate, how to have relationships. I had to learn about self-esteem. I knew there was this thing called self-esteem. I didn't know what it was, but I knew I had to get some. Like, I thought you could go and buy it somewhere. I had no idea. So I had to learn everything from the ground up. And while I was learning, I was learning it to save my life. I was learning because I needed to apply it to save my life, to stay sober, to keep moving forward, to keep living, to not go back to the horrendous life that I'd left. But I was noticing that there were all kinds of real people, and that's my term for it, the real people, wandering around that were miserable. They weren't happy. They were stuck in jobs they didn't like. They were in relationships with people who abused them, and they didn't even know that they were being abused. And I watched, I was watching all these people who weren't happy. They weren't exactly miserable. They weren't happy either. They didn't know it. And that's when I decided that I needed to do this. I needed to find a way to do this and help people. And I went into corporate training because I knew I could bury the message under corporate terms. And I still do that today, but the warning sign to me is really simple. If you're unhappy, if you're walking around, you've got a low-grade depression or depression of any kind, clinical depression, I mean, it doesn't happen overnight. There's a trigger, and if it can happen, you can undo that, and you don't need medication to do it. But any kind of warning symptoms, to me, is a symptom that you've gone off the path, that you're not living your life the way you should be living it, and that's the sign that you need help.
Now, you know, as a successful businesswoman today, looking back in your life, if you were to give a piece of advice to that 23-year-old girl who was in a gang.
That's the one question I was hoping you wouldn't ask me, actually, just because I don't want the answer to give the wrong impression. Personally, Susan Armstrong, if I could look back at Susan Armstrong and give her a piece of advice, I would say stick with it. It's all going to turn out fine. Because I honestly believe, like I said, that I was given this life so that I could do this. When I see 23-year-olds today, and I have 2 stepsons, one of whom is 23, the other one who's 25, and trust me, having to raise them through puberty, that put to the test everything I thought I believed. You know, I would say talk to someone, please, please talk to someone. Open up. You can't keep it locked inside. There's someone out there who will understand. There's someone who wants to hear what you have to say. There's someone who will help. I would say, please talk to someone.
Thank you. What does the future hold for you?
I hope more of the same. I'm having my website redone right now. It's www.susanarmstrongtraining.com. I would hope that I continue to be able to reach as many people as possible through articles, through books. I have another book coming out that hopefully will be out shortly that will be on my website. I have a radio show out of Arizona. I continue to speak at conferences as well as doing the training. So like I said, I hope that I'm able to continue to touch as many people as possible, help as many women as possible, as long as possible.
Susan, what's the name of your radio show? It's internet.
It's called Second Chances.
Second Chances.
Second Chances.
And where can people find your book?
On Amazon.ca, Amazon.com, Chapters.ca. So any online bookseller will have it. You can also go to my website, again, SusanArmstrongTraining.com, and you'll find it there.
Well, Susan, thank you so much for being here today. It's been just a real pleasure, and I wish you all the best and appreciate your time.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you.